started. If people are not into it, this is TweetChat. And I like TweetChat because it lets me follow a tweet stream without all the messages from friends and breakfast and whatever. And it's a very handy thing. And I was looking at it last night, and I came upon David Kelly's site. And David is in New York, but he's been keeping track of everything that we do here. So it's handy, rather than taking notes on everything, to be able to see this archive, which is going to be there forever, but with photographs and links to the various talks and everything else. I think it's just, amazing now that, this back channel is being created by somebody who just happens to know a couple of us and tapped into it. And it's, I know it makes my life easier. If I heard something, I can just go to Dave Kelly's thing and say, oh yeah, it's in there, and I can find it rather than recreate it. I want us to have a conversation today rather than me give a presentation. And to make that happen, we're going to have to create our own content. Informal learning is learning without a curriculum, where it's, our content rather than my content. So I want us to take a few minutes first and think about what would we like to hear people converse about, hear people talk about. And it can be things that are controversial or things that just don't add up. I'd like it to be sort of, learning lofty stuff rather than one individual project that's going on or something like that. One thing that really struck me is when we had a session for the speakers beforehand and went over some statistics, and somebody threw up these numbers. And for the folks are coming from America, as I know, and the UK, this is staggering. When you say, oh, well, let's have 10 years' time, a couple of thousand universities, 90,000 colleges, 580 million people. Sort of, whoa, different reality. And for me, there are a lot of things I want to talk about just preparing and dealing with this sort of set of numbers. Okay. Put that on me. So, first thing we'll do is we'll take like 4 or 5 minutes, and I want you to talk with the 2 or 3 people around you. And just think about, well, what topics do you want to have discussed? Do you want to be party to a conversation about for the next half hour, 45 minutes? And I want you to not just think them up, but grab a little piece of paper and write them down. Because, and it doesn't have to be questions or anything, it just be, a couple of lines, but I'd like to hear about this. And then when we've got a group up here sort of in the fishbowl having a conversation, we say, well, here's a topic, let's throw that one in. But we'll be able to sort through them and have some order to it. So for the next few minutes, while the music plays, I'll get to that in a sec, just talk with the people around you. What do we want the conversation to be about? What's missing? What doesn't work? What do we want to do here? So let's figure that out while I get the music on. I want to hear talking out there. I don't have sound input here. me pull the door closed now. Okay. How about a piece of paper? We got questions? Pass a piece of paper in this way, and then somebody collect them and bring them up to me. We have one. Don't we have any other things written down? Come on.
We have such deep ideas, we couldn't.
Oh, I see. I see.
Yeah, right.
I'd like it to be noted, George, that our team.
They're right there, yeah.
But you had the calm, collected, organized mind.
Yet yesterday, Clark Quinn mentioned really briefly the Guido Sarducci 5-Minute University. How many people have seen the 5-Minute University skit?
That's awesome.
Only a few.
Father, you've seen the Guido Sarducci.
All right, I'm going to play this right now because I think it brings up a question that I want to put on the table, which is about, do we want people to have degrees, or do we want people to learn things and be able to continue learning things? And I purport there's a big difference. And Father Guido Sarducci would say there's a big difference too. Now this is from 1960s America, the Smothers Brothers television show.
Your voice fell.
My voice fell.
No, it's not.
Boy, no, I won't go there.
Probably good. Jay from Saturday Night Live.
Yes, exactly. That's the way Saturday Night Live was. Now, the setup is that Guido Sarducci, I actually interviewed this guy for my book on informal learning and found that when he was in college, he had, several learning disorders. I mean, the guy's totally dyslexic, and he's got obsessive compulsive disorder. He can't concentrate on anything. He was flunking out of school. He went to his professor and said, if I fail this course, they're sending me to Vietnam. And I would go crazy. And the professor said, okay, I'm going to give you a pass, even though you don't deserve it. And he said, the only thing I learned in college was that some people have compassion. And, well, I'll play the video in which he purports to be the sports reporter for the Vatican newspaper. So he'll be acting like a Catholic priest, and I hope that he's understandable to all. Now let's see, where have I got that? Quick time.
I find that education, I think it don't matter where you go to school. Italy, America, Brazil, all is the same. It's all just memorization. And it don't matter how long you can remember anything, just so you can parrot it back for the test. And I got a list of it for a school I would like to start. Something called the 5-Minute University. And the idea is that in 5 minutes, you learn what the average college graduate remembers 5 years after he or she's out of school. What does it cost? Like $20. That might seem like a lot of money, $20 just for 5 minutes. But that's for like a tuition, cap and gown rental, graduation picture, snacks, everything included. Like in college, you have to take foreign language. Well, at the 5-Minute University, you can have your choice. Any language you want, you can take it. Say if you want to take Spanish, what I teach you is, ¿Cómo está usted? That means, how are you? And the answer is, muy bien, means very well. And believe me, if you took 2 years of college Spanish, 5 years after you're out of school, ¿Cómo está usted? Muy bien, about all you're going to remember. So in my school, that's all they learn. You see, you don't have to waste your time with the conjugations, vocabulary, all that junk. Just forget it anyway, and what's the difference? Economics, supply, and demand. That's it. Business is you buy something and you sell it for more. Theology, I'm going to have a theology department, since I'm a priest on the right. And what you have to learn in theology is the answer to the question, where is And the answer is, God is everywhere. Why? Because he likes you. That's kind of a combination of the Disney and Roman Catholic philosophy. It's just a perfect for the late 70s or early 80s, you know? Just a perfect. Well, after the courses are all over, then it's time for a little Easter vacation. No time to go to Fort Lauderdale. Only lasts like 20 seconds. But what I do for you, I like to turn on the sun lamp, and I'll give you a little glass of orange juice. That's the snack part, orange juice. And then after vacation, you know, this swallows real quick. Then it's the time for the final exams. I say to you, como está usted? You say, muy bien. Where is the God? The God is everywhere. Economic supply and demand. Then I put on your cap and gown. I get out to my Polaroid camera, you know, make a little snap a plastic picture for you. I give you the picture. You give me $20. I give you the diploma and your college graduate ready to go. I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure, right next door to the Fine Arts University, I'm going to open up a little law school. You know, you got another minute?
I love that one. Yeah. Got another minute? So the question that's raised is for me is if indeed, I mean, I can't remember that much that I learned in college. Do we want to send 500 million people to college where they can forget and only be able to say, you know, ¿Cómo está usted? Or do we want to look at how to have a learning community like the world's never seen before, where people are always actively learning and using stuff and whatever? So that's one question. There are a bunch of other questions which are quite interesting about informal learning, about how do we scale this thing, about what's the role of e-learning. Are classrooms still part of the equation? And I'd like to invite a couple of people to come up here and sit with me and just talk about this stuff. In fact, I'll ask a few people to start, and then we can swap out. So if you're interested, you can come up and replace somebody in a conversation. Since the people I asked before aren't here, Grania, I wonder if you would join us? Come on up. And Dave, you want to start us out too? And we'll actually pull another chair around as well. So that if somebody has, you know, strong passion around something we're talking about, just feel free to come up and join in the conversation. And when you guys get tired, you can drop out. And
I get tired easily, so come replace me.
But what do we think about the sort of continuing learning rather than just, you know, hey, you got a degree?
I think it's a large.
Oh, wait, hold on. Have we got a portable mic, or shall I pass this around?
I'm going to play devil's advocate. Hello.
Oh, right.
See, I said devil's advocate and stopped going.
Yep.
I'm going to play devil's advocate and say it's going to be an awful lot harder to administrate. I think that the formal learning process is one of those things that's really, we all understand it. Everybody understands the rules. We don't have to make up a new system. We can cookie cutter that thing in there and get it done on time. And I think there's something to be said for that. I'm going to take that.
Well, John Seeley Brown just said that the typical professional skill now has a half-life of 5 years. So if you look at that, and if you look at the acceleration of time, especially in technological areas where it's exponential, people are going to have to get the equivalent of like 30 or 40 college degree educations during their lifetime. How's that going to work?
Yeah, but that's the presumption that they're actually going to school to pick up actual professional skills. And I didn't say that. I just said that the schooling thing would be easier to do. So what are the outcomes of the traditional schooling that are valuable to us? Let's assume for a second that professional skills doesn't happen at all. Let's take that out of the equation. I will grant you that no positive professional skills will come out of the process. But they will get admittance into a certain segment of society that was closed to them before. So all of a sudden they become a graduate, and they reach a level of respectability, maybe to themselves, maybe to their peers, that wouldn't have been there before. Would we agree that that's a valuable thing?
No, I certainly would.
Self-respect in that sense, maybe part of that process. You'd also sort of be indoctrinated in some of the very basic, so maybe, I don't know if I call them professional skills, but work skills. Those things like showing up on time. And when you look at the school system, the way it was developed in England in the 19th century, it was developed so that some of the primary drivers were, how do we make people show up on time? How do we get them to take tasks and do disconnected tasks? Right? So how do you get somebody who has been brought up in a society where all the stuff they do makes sense, or at least potentially does? I mean, obviously it's an oversimplification, but you know, I get up and I go and feed the cows and I do this and everything I do is connected. And how do I get them to do a disconnected task? So how do I get them to stand in front of one part of this giant working mechanism and push one button over and over and over again? So how do I change their mindset so they can do disconnected tasks? And school does a great job of indoctrinating people to alienation, right? It gives them, they sit down and they study one piece of math without any explanation for why they're doing it. They just have to do that piece. And there's a lot of working environments for which that particular sort of standardization is something that's going to be useful to them and make them more marketable, really. So there's two.
Going back to your point about what you remember, I did a degree in chemistry, and I don't remember anything at all of chemistry. Just out of interest, how many people in this room have changed career more than once? It's really quite amazing how many of us have, and that's going to continue to happen over time. So I think it's about learning the general competencies, the kind of general life skills that you need to understand. I mean, it's interesting, I recently did a couple of courses of Spanish online. And I mean, I've been in e-learning as a researcher for years, you know, esoterically researching students from a distance and thinking I understand what's going on. But actually, in reality, being a learner online was more valuable than anything else. So it's kind of like on-task experiences, I think, that make the big difference.
You know, on your point of the socialization aspects of school, does it take school to have that socialization occur? I mean, there's an awful lot of baggage with let's go earn the degree.
It's certainly an expensive way of doing it. I don't know, but I know for a fact that schooling does teach people those things. And I can't think of anything offhand that will automatically. I mean, when we look at schools, one of the things they represent are the basic norms that we have for our society, or at least the norms we had for society, say, 30 years ago. But those norms are set, and everybody knows what they are. When I say the word school, everybody pretty much goes, oh yeah, okay, I kind of know what you mean. If I say textbook, or I say class, or I say those things, even if somebody's only gone to the minimal amount of schooling or not even gone into them, they're going to have some sense, because they're prevalent words inside of our society. Learn. Now, they may all have different meanings, but they're going to recognize the word in pretty much any language. And schools, I mean, if you look at doing change, trying to create any change in the K-12 system, for instance, the projects that I've been involved in, and we've done crazy stuff where we've taken, you know, 7th graders down to the local archives and had them digitize pictures from 150 years ago, and we had them build a 3D online world for them to put their pictures on the wall, and we do all kinds of stuff. And we get letters from parents going, well, what are they learning? Well, they're learning a lot of things, you know, besides the history part, because I actually went all the way to tie the whole project into the actual learning objectives for that program, for that year, in that time. Because I went that far down the road, and still, the biggest impediment is that their understanding of schooling is fixed, right? And you know, you try to change that during that process, but it's a long, long go. So in trying to do it a different way than with schooling, you've got to confront, not only we got to come up with a new way of doing this, but also we have to convince all of these people that this new way is somehow more relevant than the old way. Look at me taking the opposite position. That's just because I'm Martin.
But
Come on up.
it's this whole thing, you know, if a democracy of 1.2 billion people is going to take on the most massive change in education in world history, maybe we can rewrite some of the rules. And I don't know, now Dave, you're escaping, but when you said, you know, we know what a textbook is. I think, yeah, that's something that's not going to exist in 5 years because it's going to be, for a lot of people on an iPad or in a different form. And sorry if anybody's in the textbook business, but these things are too expensive for students to afford now. And they're morphing into some other kind of weirdness. In classrooms, there are an awful lot of online classrooms. They're just provoking. Welcome to the conversation.
Well, thank you. I just was observing something, we're sitting here today and talking about education 20 years from now, right? And if you think of a hypothetical situation where there would be people, like let's say in 2025, and sitting and talking about how education went. So, because we don't see the results of what we are doing today happening instantly, right? We're talking a lot about technology, interventions, and catering to different students of different learning abilities. But the results are going to come probably after 5 years or 10 years, the real results, because right now it's more about, increasing the attention span. But retention is something which will come later. And it would be a good idea to sit and also contemplate that what did we learn during our school years and college years which did create an impact on us and which we do remember. Was it the pedagogy or was it the content design? Because there has to be something good which also impacted us at that point of time. I do remember a little bit of my chemistry probably because my faculty was very nice and, so we could engage ourselves. So is it the intellectual ability of a child at that particular age, or is it the way it is delivered? So I was just sort of observing this and wanted to share it with.
The thing I remember most are the good teachers. And I think it's the role of the teacher. I mean, I think the role of the teacher is changing in this new environment, but I think teachers in the future will still be really important, providing kind of guided learning pathways and in particular motivation. Would somebody else like to come up? I think it's time for somebody else.
Well, let me ask you on teacher, though. Does the teacher have to be in the room? Or can the teacher be virtual?
No, they don't have to be in the room. They can be virtual. And I think the interesting thing about new technologies is increasingly we're seeing content being free through open educational resources. We're seeing tools being free through things like MOOCs, for example. We're seeing expertise being free. And so the question is, what does that mean for traditional institutions? If everything else is free, what is the role of a traditional institution? And I think it's threefold. I think it's guided, pedagogically sound learning pathways. I think it's support and motivation, and I think it's accreditation. So I think the role of teacher will change, but it will still be very important.
Okay. I want to build on something you said.
Yeah, okay.
In that I think it's absolutely important for people to reflect on, well, what did I take away from the college experience and the earlier thing? But I think it's equally important that we think about, well, how did I learn things after that? Where did that learning come from? Because it's probably something I want to encourage. There are a few questions in here about informal learning. And informal learning is learning without a fixed curriculum, essentially. It's more that way than the other. I mean, informal and formal are a spectrum, if you will. But just learning from experience is what kicks in after we're through with the formal education process. And some people are a lot better at learning from experience than others who just let things happen to them. So there's some trick in there. Now, two new faces. Welcome.
There are two things. One is the formal education, in which delivery is very important. I'll just tell my own experience. Till grade 6, I have always been a meritorious student, but I was always very afraid of mathematics. I used to get 99 number out of 100, but still very afraid of it because my teacher was not so good in delivering or building up the confidence. Then in 7th grade, my faculty changed. And that person built up the confidence into me, and that was the reason that I could take up my engineering, and mathematics is now my favorite subject. So it is not about the subject, it is about the delivery in formal education and how well you are motivating the child. Now this is in formal education. Now if you go to informal education, formal concepts needs to be in your mind. You need to know what is gravitation. But before that, you need to know gravitation as a word, as a spelling, or what does it mean. Then only you can go to informal education to experiment it. You'll pick up a ball, throw it upwards, it come down, then only you will do the experimentations. So formal, then comes the informal.
I generally agree with that. Yeah. It's sort of a mix, because there's
It's
this
a mix.
in-between land where you've got some formal and some structure and
Right.
some
You need to know
history, and
Yeah.
you're integrating it with the real world as you go
So
along.
when we are like having a class where we are sort of imparting information to, let's say, 1,000 students online, then how does that motivation come? It comes from the design of the content, right?
Well, from my way of looking at things, motivation is an individual thing that depends on, first, me feeling empowered to do something. You know, I'm not just a pawn taking stuff in, but I've got some control. And that with that autonomy, I'm improving. I'm learning new things, I'm accomplishing stuff, and it's all for some higher purpose, which may be my individual fulfillment. It may be able to take this new job. It may be to feel I'm part of this new club, whatever it is. But I think the motivation comes from that. Now, it's unmotivating if the delivery's bad or doesn't support those or doesn't let me see how I'm interacting with it. But to me, the motivation's sort of the psychological aspect of it.
Jay, in this case, don't we feel that motivation also comes down sometimes from the scoldings of your teacher? Which is in the real world, in physical world, you get a scolding for example, in my case only.
Constructive feedback.
It's constructive feedback. Once when we were in class 10th, and I got 18 out of 20 in my mathematics test, which was a unit test conducted at our tuition, and my faculty closed down that batch, that you scored 18 only out of 20. So that was
More than half, I think, raise their hands when asked about, have you had a career change? So you've had a significant amount of, learning new stuff involved in that. Where did you think you learned more? Either in school, formal education, or experience, things that happen after school? So we'll have a little vote here. How many people have, most of the learning is from school and formal education? Okay, and things that happen after school and experience.
Can we just, one of the things that's with that dichotomy is that we spend a hell of a lot more time in informal learning, right? So you spend 4 years in school and then 30 years in learning. So proportionally, you learn more.
Well, there's that, but there's the old Jesuit thing of, give me the boy for the first 5 years of his life and I've got him forever. The schools manage to, dare I say, brainwash, shape people in their formative years. Yet somehow we can overcome it.
I think in the formal learning environment, it's knowledge acquisition, and in the informal, it is the application. So when we are actually learning by doing things, we sort of are able to learn better.
in formal education also, when you are in a school, you already have a network of 30 to 50 students who are there with you. So in school also it is formal plus informal. You learn from your peers. For example, maybe you learn ethics from your peers, in which your friends are there. For example, a person steals somebody else's pencil. This is formally not required to be taught. If he is stealing, then he'll be scolded and he would be made up away from the group. So he learns informally into a formal system also.
That's such an excellent point. I mean, I know when I was in business school, I learned a lot more in my little study group of 4 people who lived in the same neighborhood, trying to figure out what the hell is this? What are we going to say tomorrow? And that's when I figured out what a case was about, not in the public sort of debating forum where the official classes. It's interesting. We've got several questions here about e-learning. Can e-learning fully replace the classroom learning? But no. But the thing is, looking at e-learning often leaves out the social aspects that can be now accessed. So the equivalent to my study groups is social networks, and it's having online discussions with other people, because I really learn socially with other people more than just being exposed to content. It's funny, I haven't heard much of that conversation at all during this event. Come on up here. That's the way just come and take a seat.
Well, I wanted to say something about the e-learning thing. I'm wondering, and this is more a question than a comment, or that most of us. So, like Dave said, one of the jobs of formal education is to give us confidence. I can do that,
Right.
So most of us have done great formal education and are now looking at informal education and all this e-learning and MOOCs and so on as where we are able to better appreciate the freedom because we came from a formal learning
Sure.
background. So I'm really wondering that, if you grow a huge generation of young learners, mostly on e-learning, what will that produce actually? So,
Let me mention, I get the willies when I hear e-learning,
yeah.
because everybody's got their own definition of e-learning.
Yeah.
And if e-learning means computer-only instruction, I'm against it, because it doesn't work very well. If it means that's an available way to get content, and then there are other things you do to process that content, be involved with others, okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. That scales. And particularly, it is so crazy, like 55% of the undergraduate teaching in American colleges is in like 18 subjects. It's basic English, it's basic math, it's introduction to chemistry. Why on earth would you want to get that content from some drunken grad student who can just barely talk, rather than from somebody who's a masterful presenter who's got a nice thing on YouTube? I mean, it's just, that one confuses me.
No, I think I'd like to comment on that.
Okay.
I think it's the package that happens in a physical classroom. I mean, it's the content itself, the interaction on that content. I didn't get this, or I got that, or I'm wondering about this, and the assessment, which tells, which gives the student, like Dave said, the confidence that that I know the subject. Oh, this is all this subject is about, so I can do better than this.
But
so
the
stepping
content
stone
doesn't
part.
have to be invented by the institution to be,
Sure.
part of that package.
So that's for the institution to improve their content if their local faculty is not great, isn't it? I'm just wondering about that.
I don't think, it seems to me that there are only so many ways you're going to present basic English language skills or algebra or something like that. You might as well get a few great presenters and, have them do the basics, and then the place we need teachers, instructors, facilitators, et cetera, is to process that. Now, actually, I think you were next.
I'm asking a simple question from all of us. How many of us started speaking before going to school? This is formal learning by our family. It is not informal learning. And if we can speak our language without going to school, it means going to school is for learning that particular system in which we can write, we can read. And again, as far as knowledge of a particular subject is concerned, within 10 or 5 years, we will be having biochips in which we can choose our subject and the knowledge will be in our mind by embedding the biochip. In such a world, there will be no difference in formal or informal learning. Learning will be always there. Whatever we get for us as knowledge, that will always exist. As well as whatever we learn, I can quote myself. The day when I stepped in primary school to middle school, my school was changed, and I saw in the school, as soon as we enter, there is a board where all the degrees of 3 streams, arts, science and commerce, are listed. And I started reading them. And in commerce stream, the highest degree mentioned there was the chartered accountant. That day I took decision, I will get this degree, and later on, whatever I did for that. This is informal learning for formal learning. As well as after completion of my education, so many things have come in our life. TV is a new thing for us. These mobiles are new things for us. These laptops, these iPads, and so many things are coming. If we are learning for these things, this is formal learning, not the informal learning. Because we cannot use these instruments or these gadgets without learning these formally. We have to learn how to operate, how to do these things. Therefore, if we define informal and formal in two different angles of a particular thing, it is not correct, as in every formal learning we are learning informally, as well as in every informal learning we are formal.
So, just trying to bring in a little bit of a human behavior element into this. So I see learning quite dependent on how humans behave. Long back in my management school, I learned about theory X and theory Y. And there are certain people, I don't remember really, but my guess is, I think the X are who need to be pushed and the Y are who are self-motivated and self-learners. I see informal learning, personally, the way I have sort of picked up more in terms of learning through networks and through sheer experience after college, has been because I have been a self-motivated learner. And I learn much better when I am able to navigate through what I need. That's one comment. The other comment is, again, related to human behaviors. My behavior is influenced by how I'm measured. And fundamentally, and I see this a lot more in India, and that's where my question is, when families, educational institutions, companies measure me on a number and a metric, then a formal learning environment becomes more relevant to me because I get a grade, I get a score. And it's a demand and supply equation. And if the supply is not as much in terms of quality talent in respect to the demand, I would do whatever that is required to ensure that I will compete. Just as I compete as a company, I compete with my other peer talent to ensure that every single mark puts me at an edge. And this is unfortunate. I see this with my 10-year daughter. I mean, I was just talking to my wife this morning. She is in grade 4 in one of the best schools in Bangalore. My wife is obsessed about her doing very well in exams. And she's an extremely well-read, well-learned person. But I mean, that's how the society is pushing this at a phenomenal pace. And I feel very concerned about these little children where the parental influence and obsession for marks. Mm-hmm. And specifically in India, I see that a lot more. The obsession for marks, as of now, the Chief Minister of Delhi has been talking on the radio, children, all the best, people are committing suicides. For what? For the simple reason, this is scary, by the way. This is really, really scary in terms of how they're actually committing suicide. Because of the fact that they're not getting marks.
The U.S. is worse off than almost anybody else with a No Child Left Behind, where if you don't teach people to pass a specific test and get scores, you lose part of their funding of your school. So instead of helping people learn, they're helping them pass tests. It's a totally artificial, crazy system.
Absolutely. So I sort of bring it down to a point and saying, until and unless we do not change, and I'm using a word, quotes unquote, educational brokers. If you do not change the mindset and get them to understand in terms of what it really means. They will hold information to the best interest, their vested interests. I see that a lot more happening today.
Yeah, I want to throw in a few things. I mean, because it really rang my chimes on a few ideas. Throughout the conversation, there's also been almost no discussion about community. It's been as if setting up schools, and we know enough about schools in India that there's going to be some funny stuff going on in setting up schools. The government's going to have its hand in, and there are going to be pockets lined, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Setting up schools we haven't talked about parents. We haven't talked about the overall community and the things that, the environment. And why aren't they an intimate part of the conversation about where we're going? I mean, the parents certainly have a big vested interest. Now, somebody that's courage enough to be up here gets to talk into the microphone, so go for it.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to actually question the very definition and the purpose of formal education, as we call it. I mean, going to school on time, 6 days or 5 days a week, and doing this, following a set curriculum, and then receiving instruction from the teacher is actually defined as we understand, and therefore we love to complain about it. But tell me, how many kids actually started to learn to walk without their parent holding their hand for a while?
Sure.
Nobody did, right? I think the purpose of primary and the formal education is lost. You see, because when for example, when I grew up, how do you expect at, for example, age of 5 or 6, what is science or what is social science or whatever? If you expose that to me, then I will start feeling interested or disinterested in a subject. And also it was supposed to be designed saying, okay, in this 12-15 years, can I be fed with certain things so that I can efficiently learn a certain amount of knowledge. So it was to bring in that efficiency. It was left to me to decide, maybe I may not have been that efficient in learning. So it's more about that. And it's only because now it has been boiled down to, okay, exactly this has to be taught, this is how it has to be taught, this is how you have to be excelling on, and this is how much you should be scoring, that everything has got messed up is what I feel. Had some freedom been given there, things change. And I experienced this, when I went through school and then I did MBA, the obvious, that was also formal education. But the teacher taught nothing within the covers of the books, The teachers just, I remember many teachers who came in, or faculty members, just raised few questions that were enough to spend not just that session, but whole day discussing even outside of the classroom. Mm-hmm. And that's where we learned, right? So it's what teachers do within. How do they spark interest, and how do they, even within the framework of formal education, you can get a lot more.
Well, all learning is part formal and informal. I mean, it's no. I have corporations go, should we have informal learning? I say, look, that's the way people are learning their jobs now. It's just you aren't supporting it at all. You're oblivious to it.
Yeah, but okay, we have been talking about the education system and teachers and students, but especially in India, there is anyways a huge mass of children who don't have schools and teachers, any which ways. So how are we helping them? How can we help them? Is it through building communities of teachers who can informally help them? Because I don't see magically schools and teachers coming up in the next 5 years where children who are, say, 2 or 3 or 5 now will get the schooling and the formal education they need to be at par with the rest. So when we talk of schooling and education in the Indian context, because the scale is so huge, we think in millions all the time, and the millions that are getting educated is really small compared to the millions who are not.
Well, that makes me wonder if schools are the answer. Exactly. I mean, at breakfast, I told an old joke about a tailor from New York goes to Rome and meets with the Pope. And when he comes back to New York, his friends say, what's the Pope like? And they say, well, he's a 37 regular. Because that's what tailors look at. And school people look at schools as solutions rather than hold it. If we got 500 million people that have got to see themselves differently and be empowered to start learning, well, maybe building up communities, social networks, et cetera, is a big chunk of the answer without the formal teachers, classrooms, schools.
Right, so just to say that in a little differently, I'm saying just because we have the problem of the scale, we should not try to fit the standard solution that we see around the world, that is fixed 12 years of education in school, into that. Can we have a separate agenda or a plan or a curriculum, as however you may want to call it, for the masses, which could be actually extended and provided for the masses.
Okay.
And then have a vehicle
Unfortunately-
to bring them into the mainstream if they are interested.
I'm not going to be the guy who breaks the rules that I've been trying to get
Jay,
DPLOF to implement. We are out of time. So you're up here, say a few lines, and you'll say the last line. Go ahead.
So my question is there any data from America on outcome of homeschooling? So there are a lot of kids, I guess, and why I'm asking this is, I did not study in a school formally until grade 5. My grandfather was my teacher, just used to teach me for 1 hour, okay? And I kind of, got admitted to a school in grade 6 in India and went on doing engineering and IIM Bangalore and things like that. So I in no way found myself, to have something lacking because I didn't go to school, right, until grade 5. In the similar manner, there are many kids in America, especially homeschooling seems to be a pretty good concept, and there are some adventurous parents in Bangalore who are trying this, very rare, maybe 0.0001%. So the question is...
The problem is that homeschooling American style does not scale. People do not have the time, there are not enough qualified parents, long list of things. I mean, it's not going to solve the sort of problems we're talking about here. Last observation.
The last point is, can we have a curriculum which is, say, IQ based? For example, you give up a GMAT test, difficulty level keeps on changing. It is low difficulty, medium, and then the higher difficulty level. The same way, every child has a different learning pattern. A person, say, X would be very good in mathematics and Y would not be. So, as per their learning pattern, with formal and informal education together, a person who is very good in mathematics, maybe he is right now in 7th grade as per our systems, but he has the IQ level of 10th grade. So he can clear up those 10th grades if we have such kind of curriculum, rather than a fixed curriculum, a dynamic curriculum as per child's interest. So that could be a solution.
Tell you, one thing I take away from this, I think, is a really big question about whether the end goal is to have people knowing things or to have people becoming different people. And there's quite a shift there. Thank you very much for your attention. We are out of time. We are done. Thanks to everybody up here.
Thank you.
I can't resist, Jay, making one comment. When I told people that you were coming to India, they said, finally we'll get to meet the man who named the mess we are all in.